Thor Ragnarok is the third movie based on the adventures of Thor, and this time he teams up with the Hulk, who is both his friend and his enemy. You could say like a frenemy, or as he says himself in the trailer, it's a friend from work. And in this movie, Thor has a very important adventure that is linked to his home planet, which is about to be destroyed by his sister. I'm not really spoiling anything, but there is this big threat to the world of the gods where he came from, and he has to team up with the Hulk and ultimately also with his brother. And then there's also his father as part of the story to solve the situation, save or well. Nah, I'm not going to say anything about that. This is a spoiler-free review. But anyway, what makes this third installment of the Thor series so special is that it is not a classic Thor movie. It's not even, in many ways, a classic Marvel movie. We've seen Thor, of course, in his own movies, but also Thor was an important character in the Avengers movies. But this time it's another standalone movie. But this is not a regular superhero action movie. This is a comedy first. If you want to kind of get an idea, if you haven't seen a movie yet, and you want to get an idea of what what kind of movie this is, I think the Marvel movie that comes closest, or the Marvel movies that come closest, are the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. It's that kind of humor. It's off the wall. It's really weird. And for Thor, it is definitely out of character, which is very daring. And it's something that Disney deliberately did by hiring a Kiwi, so a New Zealand director, Taika Waititi. It's a very Kiwi name, who is known mostly for his comedies. And when he was brought on by Disney, the question to him was, can you do something completely new with Thor? And we want you to turn this into a comedy. Now, that's, of course, a big risk, because Thor is one of the most over-the-top characters that I know in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I remember hating the first movie, because this Thor was so over the top, and even his home world and the backstory, it was so different from like the regular superheroes that we'd seen so far, like, I don't know, Captain America and Iron Man. That all was kind of much more grounded. And then this Thor was so larger than life in all the ways. And it is, I also thought that the romance didn't really work. It was very much a kind of a fish out of the water type of story. But it underwhelmed. And it's only later that after seeing the second movie that I went back to the first movie and I started to kind of like the character. But it's mostly the sketches that I saw afterwards with Chris Hemsworth, who is the actor who plays Thor. They did some like these little YouTube videos, and that's where I discovered that actually Chris Hemsworth has tremendous comedic timing. It's something that they developed already in the Avengers, in the second Avengers movie. And in this movie, they place that in the center. So it's not the fact that Chris Hemsworth is like a super bodybuilder type of Schwarzenegger superhero. But he's not there for the muscle. He's there for the incredible comedic timing. And Tom Hiddleston, of course, was also kind of this actor who could do both very serious, very good villain, but he could also do humor. And then the Hulk also has something a bit larger than life. Duh, the Hulk is larger than life. But to create this comedic tension between Thor and the Hulk, it worked so well. So this is a movie that made me smile and laugh all the time. The story itself is pretty lightweight. And you know what? In other Marvel installments, that would have bothered me. We've kind of seen these massive planet destructions and big fight at the end. But what made this so good and so enjoyable was also that this director dare to go very small scale in a lot of scenes. And you have this banter going on throughout the movie where you've got a sense that like half of it is improvised. And it was. It actually was. So the way that director Taika Waititi, constructed this movie is he had the plot, he had the lines, the script was written, but then he decided that he would forget about all of that. That was just like an indication of where the story would go. But he allowed his actors to improvise all the time. And he would be filming a lot of these scenes, and we just kept on rolling. And he would let the actors just go free flow, just have this conversation, come up with something. And a lot of the scenes that you see in the final movie are condensed versions of like 10-minute long dialogue where nothing happens, but it's just comedy gold. And in order to get that from his actors, that's of course difficult to do when you have such a big budget movie and there are so many expectations. And Disney is not the easiest going company to work for. But he wanted to create a very cool vibe on the set. He says there's always music, there's good food, and we always try to start filming when everybody's feeling great and there's no pressure whatsoever. And that's how you get the chemistry. And I think you need a very, very good, talented director to make this happen, because exactly the same approach was taken for the new Ghostbusters installment, the all-female Ghostbusters movie. That director did exactly the same thing. He let his actresses just improvise, and then he would condense that, and that would hopefully create a fun movie. Some people think he succeeded. I personally thought it was not working. The chemistry didn't work, and the jokes fell flat. But here it works, and oh man, it works beyond my expectations. This is so amazing what they did. And here's a tip. If you want to hear more about how the jokes in this movie came about, make sure you see the movie first, because of course, if you hadn't guessed so already, I give this movie a big recommend. If you like Marvel, if you like the humor in Guardians of the Galaxy, you will love Thor Ragnarok. Don't expect a very original story, but you're going to be entertained. There is a podcast episode of a show called Good One. So in your podcast browser or app, just look for Good One. It's a podcast about jokes. And in the last episode, there is an interview with Thor Ragnarok director Taika Waititi, who explains how he created those jokes. And he gives examples, and it is a hoot. It is so funny. It's such a great interview. And what is also excellent about this movie is that the director himself plays a role. And usually he always creates a little role for himself. It can be a background character, it can be something a bit more important in his movie. And in this movie, he was like on the fence, like, what am I going to do? He didn't even know. And then there was this one stone giant who is an alien that we've also seen in previous Thor movies. Not exactly this character. And he's like, that could be fun. And he was experimenting while they were proofreading with various accents. And then he's like, you know what? I'm just going to do the Kiwi accent. And I'm just going to give, because it's a big giant, like a blue stone giant. It looks a bit like the Thing from the Fantastic Four, a little bit slimmer, but anyway. And then he has this Kiwi accent, and it's this very, very, very kind guy. And I can't do a Kiwi accent convincingly, but it is always, every phrase ends like, a little bit goes up like that. And it's such a cool contrast between the exterior of this big giant monster and then being this very polite, very kind Kiwi, And it's so funny. It's one of the best characters of the entire movie, and absolutely, I think this is going to be a fan favorite who hopefully will be back in a lot of movies, because actually, I think this movie was so good that they should do another one and have this director do Star Wars as well, and if they ever want to do a Star Wars comedy, please give us a movie with this director at the helm. I have no doubt that it would be fantastic. And there is one element of this approach that also has story repercussions and even has a bit of a message, I think. And that was the whole idea of deconstructing the hero. because that's what they did. They was like, we've got this over the top Thor, this god of thunder, and we've seen him playing all these big heavy roles in the past, and they make fun of that all the time. Well, let's do exactly the opposite. Let's completely break that down and strip that character from everything that made Thor Thor, and let's rebuild him with humor. And that is why the movie is so fresh, and it so works. And they kind of tried to do that with the Hulk as well, although I think with Thor it worked better than with the Hulk. But this is also kind of part of the overall story of the movie, where Thor ends up on this new planet, the one that you've seen in the trailers, where he's got to fight in the arena, etc. But he loses his main weapon. He loses his hammer. That's also was something you saw in the trailer, so I'm not spoiling anything. And that hammer stands for everything that Thor was, for his power and everything. And then he's about to lose his homeworld as well. Asgard is now threatened by the goddess of death, and so everything. It looks like he's going to lose everything. And then he discovers that what he is does not depend on his tools or on his image, or he has to kind of rediscover who he truly is and what gives him strength. And that made me think of a very well-known biblical story about Samson. And Samson was this judge who had this tremendous, formidable, superhuman power. And he was invincible, basically. He could, by himself, could attack like whole groups of brigands and everything. And the strength was linked to his hair. So people said that it's because of his long black hair that he has this super strength. And he was so afraid to lose his hair because that would make him powerless. So during the night, one of his enemies cuts his hair, and the next day he wakes up and he's powerless. Or so he thinks. Because then he's brought in front of a tribunal, and then they're about to condemn him. And then he asks if he can lean against one of the big marble pillars. And while doing that, he prays God for strength, and God gives him back his superpowers. And then he takes the marble pillars and pulls them like a Hulk, and the entire edifice collapses, killing everyone, including Samson. But that's how he revenges. He takes revenge. So it's kind of a biblical avenger in a certain way. Well, that story, that exact symbolism is also in Thor Ragnarok. And apparently this was not in the original script. According to the podcast episode that I referred to, this is something that Chris Hemsworth came up with on the set. He's like, well, what if we cut my hair? Because, of course, Thor in the previous movies always had this long, flowing blonde hair. And he's terrified. I mean, Thor is terrified that someone, and it's a cool cameo, I won't spoil it, someone is going to cut off his hair. And even Thor, now that he's about to lose Asgard, he has lost his hair, he has lost his hammer, he has to discover where his true strength lies. Now, he's not going to pray the rosary, I can tell you that. But I thought, symbolically, this is an important theme. Who you are, and your inner strength does not depend on what has been given to you, or your tools or your powers. It's like your ability to be productive and to be creative does not depend on Wi-Fi or on a fast internet connection or on money or on means. It's something that is within you, and ultimately, I would say, as a priest, it's God-given. Your talents are God-given, and your ultimate strength comes from a different place. And even if you lose everything in life, there is still God who can give you what you need to fulfill His will. And so, for me, as a priest, I'm looking at this movie and I'm just having a great time. It's a popcorn movie. It's a fun movie. But I also saw this theme where I was like, I like that. I like that because it's true. It's something that we experience also in our lives. And sometimes it takes a lifetime to discover that our true strength and the stability in our life does not depend on others or on our material situation, but that your strength can always be given to you by God if you ask for it. So, anyway, that is my review of Thor Ragnarok. I've got so much more to talk about. I loved this movie, but I'm going to keep it at this. I want you to discover the movie for yourself. So go check it out while it is in your theater. You will love it.